You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Greetings, everyone. Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily, episode 1459. Today's tip is a classic from the Driving Radio Show, where Dr. Wendy Ying explains to her co-host Glenn the basics of feeding a starved horse. I like to repeat this one every few years or so because it's a really common question in forums and on Facebook pages. It's not as simple as you think.
Well, today, Wendy, we're gonna be very timely. We're gonna talk about somebody who adopts, like I just did, a horse or a pony that is definitely skinny. That is probably a 1 or 2 on the scale, on the health scale, which means that it hasn't had much vittles in the last couple of months, and the hip bones are sticking out. It looks like a cow, pretty much, from the back end. And my little pony certainly did. So, first thing we did on the way home with the pony in the trailer, hoping it didn't die on the way home, and didn't fall over, was we called Wendy and we said, okay, Wendy, what do we do? And I'm sure a lot of people that, end up doing this and having a kind heart don't know what to do, because you can't just take them home and throw them a whole bunch of food and hope for the best.
Yeah, that's right. And actually that really did inspire me to write something down, like an easy protocol, because you get calls like this and you're like, oh, what should I do? And the first thing is just human nature. We want to say, oh my God, we'll give them as much food as they'll eat. And yes, that's exactly what you think you should do. But there's a syndrome in all mammals called refeeding syndrome. And it's actually, they first really studied it in depth with prisoners of war from Japanese prison camps. And they got back to, the American prisoners got back into the American hospitals, and they were starving, so they fed them. But then they suffered all these problems like heart arrhythmias and had electrolyte imbalances. They had organ problems, and many of them died. And it was because the body has shifted into using a different kind of metabolism. It's a kind of metabolism that I had to lose all that weight when I was so fat last year. And so I went into, I did a diet that didn't involve any carbs. So my body was in ketosis, but it takes a while for your body to use those fats. Then conversely, it takes a while to switch back to use carbohydrates. So this protocol that I have on I have it on the blog site, and I'll share it on our webpage, is an easy way to switch from the ketotic metabolism back to using carbs and get on a more normal metabolism. So also, there's also the danger in horses that is different from other mammals, is that you can just guess what are the big 2 things that are going to happen: laminitis and colic, right?
Right.
So you have to be worried about that too. So if you start on a slow, our theory is go low and slow. So you want to have low sugar, low carbs, and just slowly start feeding them. So how do you tell if you rescue this pony and he's too skinny and really starving, or if he's just a skinny pony where you don't have to worry, right?
Okay.
So one of the things we talked about earlier in the show is where their fat's deposited. There are lots of places on the internet and also at your local feed store. I know that Purina puts out a body condition score sheet, and I'm sure all the other feed companies do. But it's we give them a score of 1 to 9 to rate their body condition. So if they're a body condition of less than 3, then that you should start on a protocol like this when you start on back feeding. And 3 would be you can see all their hip bones, you can see their ribs. Their neck doesn't have much muscle on it. They really don't have much muscle. And in your pony's case, he was even losing his, the fat behind his eyes. So that is, you can just imagine somebody really gaunt. Another parameter we use is, have they eaten anything in the last 5 days? Sometimes horses, I just got called on a case about this horse that got trapped in this barbed wire fence for 3 days. Well, yeah, you hope it was there for 3 days, but how long if they haven't checked on it in 3 days?
They probably haven't checked on it in a week.
Yeah, so you don't know. So a horse like that, they only have what they can reach, basically. So that horse hasn't eaten in so long that this would be, even though he's not super skinny, because he's been without food for so long, it'd be a good plan to follow this way. And then also another easy way is, has he lost more than 15% of his body weight within 60 days? So I don't know when the pictures were when you first saw him, but you said that you thought that maybe he fell into that category.
Yeah, it was 2 months ago, and I'm sure that this is a yes to this one. Yeah.
Right. So, of course, the first thing you want to do is call your vet, right? So that's what Glenn did before he even closed the door of the car. So it's always good to get help. It's never wrong to ask your veterinarian to come help you and even come over and do an initial exam. Right. So have them get some professional help. And then the way that we're going to start feeding them up is to put them on alfalfa hay, because alfalfa hay is really good in this situation because it's very high in protein and low in carbohydrates.
And that would, instinctively, I would think, don't put them on alfalfa because it's so rich,
Yeah, and lots of people think that, or they think it makes them crazy, blah, 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 blah. But horses do better on high protein and high fat rather than high carbs.
Okay.
So like a lot of pony breeders, you'll see that a lot of pony breeders actually feed straight alfalfa. And those ponies are crazy and they look great. But you think, oh my God. But they're actually doing that because they have less chance of having laminitic episodes when they're on like a rich hay diet rather than grain.
Right.
So like the first couple of days, just give them like just handfuls, like a quarter of a flake every couple of hours, because you don't want to overwhelm their body. Then like after the first 2 or 3 days, you can keep gradually adding it. So that give them a flake like every couple of hours. In my example, I said, give them one flake every 8 hours. So you don't want to be up all night. I mean, essentially, you're kind of like bottle feeding. You're on the bottle feeding schedule. You're going to go look at them every couple hours and see, oh my God, are you still alive? And give them a little.
We were on poop patrol. We were watching the poop because it was totally liquid when we were there, and we just wanted to see some solids eventually. And today he's very solid, actually.
Yeah, and that's another thing. You need to really keep watching the poop, especially in Florida. We have a big problem with sand colic, so you want to watch and see if sand's coming out.
There was a lot of sand, and that partly because he lived on a sand lot. There was no cover at all. It was just sand. So
right, yeah, and so now he's going to start eating more. He's going to pass sand. They can get really gassy. So you have to watch for colic episodes. They could get. They really are at this point. This first week is like you have to imagine that barn is your emergency room, and that's your critical care section. So, if you had seen any kind of constipation or gas, or they were down rolling, then you would have had to call your vet immediately.
Right.
So if they make it past a week, then you're doing a good job, and you can continue feeding alfalfa. Like, don't give them any grain yet, but you can continue feeding the alfalfa and start bumping it up so that by the end of 2 weeks, they're eating as much hay as they want. Right? Because especially with a pony, it's really skinny. You don't have any, I'm not going to say you don't have any because that'll come back to bite me, but you have a very low chance of laminitis from too many calories at this point because they're just desperate for calories.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so say if alfalfa is not an option for you, if you're feeding grass hay, like you guys are feeding grass hay, right?
Right. Yep. So
if you're feeding grass hay, you're just going to double the amount, but use the same kind of feeding schedule.
Okay. And he has been eating it and, gobbling up most of it.
Yeah. And, another thing is sometimes you rescue these horses that are, your pony's young and has good teeth. But if you rescue an older pony that maybe has an injury, that's another reason why you should call the vet in the beginning. Check to make sure they don't have a, broken jaw or injuries that stop it from eating or dental issues. And if that's the case, they might be in such a bad state that you can't really do anything about that injury or their teeth right now, but you could give them a mash, like alfalfa meal mashed up so that they can even slurp it down so they don't need to chew.
Got it. And then we did that actually the first 2 days. We mixed it with a little bit of bran and put the hay in with that and mixed it up and wet it down. And he thought he had died and gone to heaven with that.
Yeah, and that's really good too, because you want to, for sure, they're probably going to be dehydrated along with it. And like I said, their electrolytes are in such a bad state. Like their body's just been using anything that they have left, right? So they have no stores of building blocks to even attempt metabolism, right?
Right.
So giving them some electrolytes, as long as you can find one that doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, is not a sugar base, like a mash with alfalfa meal and water and electrolytes is good. And always, of course, put out salt and water.
One of the things that we did use, and they're one of our sponsors, is we used Horse Quencher, the Horse Quencher product that we've talked about here on the show before. And that's a product, an all-natural product that is supposed to help them drink, and it has, it's kind of a fibrous product.
Yeah.
And we used that for, the first couple of days, and he loved that stuff.
I bet.
He just loved it and drank right up. And he's not having any trouble drinking. He finishes 10 gallons a night when he's in his stall, which for a tiny little pony tells you something.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. They do require a lot of water because what's happening now is you're refeeding them and they have to replenish all these stores. Think about it. They've been using this just to survive. Mm-hmm. Right? So one of the other things is you can't tax them metabolically. So if you live in a cold area, they have to be kept warm. They can't make their own body heat.
Right.
Or if you live in a hot area, they have to be protected from the sun. They need fans. They can't cool themselves. Their heart is they're at a very dangerous point where they could have a heart attack at any minute. Say you're in a place, you want to have them kind of on their own. They can't fight other horses at this point.
Well, that's another thing, too. Obviously, coming from the situation it did, we have this one quarantined for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what the other horses had. We don't know if it's had shots. We don't know any of that stuff. So
right.
Yeah.
And they're going to go through a lot more water because, they need water to process all these things you're giving them.
Yeah. So food.
So you make it to 2 weeks.
Yeah, what do we do then? Right? Now, one of the things we talked about right away was, do we worm him right away, or do we, we doubt he's had shots, so we don't know whether he's had shots or not.
Yeah.
So do you do that? And Jennifer.
No. That's what I was saying. Like when the vet comes the first time, and this is good too, because your vet will tell you the same thing, is the first time they're just going to give you an exam and tell you the problems, but maybe not treat anything because they're too sick.
Yeah.
Like if you vaccinated them now, they don't have the building blocks to even make antibodies.
I don't know if there's any muscle there to put the shot in.
Right. It's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And also it would really stress their system. So really just have the vet point out the things you need to work on. And it's like peeling an onion. So you have to work on one thing at a time. So one thing is you have to get him eating again and make sure he gets through that. And then, if you make it to 2 weeks, that's the time when we say, okay, I think this is, without any setbacks, this is the time when you can start introducing something new. Like you can start adding grain. And I really prefer a senior feed because it's very low in carbs and it's high in protein. It's also alfalfa based and it's easy to chew.
Makes sense, yeah.
Right? So on the website, I'll have a little chart of how you feed them up. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, you can also start working on things like parasites. I mean, for sure, they're going to be filled with worms.
Right.
And
covered in ticks, too, by the way.
I know. And ticks, too. That's another problem there because ticks really can cause with that many ticks, that can cause a kind of weakness and paralysis. So I'm surprised he's not suffering from that with that many ticks. And it also drains their red blood cells, and they can have a lot of inflammatory reactions from that.
And I don't do ticks, so Jennifer had to do that part because, I have this aversion to ticks after getting Lyme disease for my entire life. So I don't. Ticks are, they really bug me.
I'm not blaming you.
Jennifer does that. I was like, Jennifer, ticks, come over here.
I know. And now some of the other things you're going to have to look at out for when he gets better is. You're tackling the sand problem, but that's probably going to be a chronic thing. So you're going to want to treat him for sand.
And
That's
the
going
way
to take
we
a
do
long time
that,
to get that out.
we do the flax thing here.
Yeah.
We don't do the psyllium, we do the flax, and seems to have been working pretty well for Beaker at this point. So
Yeah, I like that. I keep mine here in Florida. I keep mine on flax all the time as a preventative.
yeah, I take flax too, so I don't get sand colic. But
You do?
that's a different thing, I guess.
Then you're going to have to see if he has any chronic diseases. Like, we don't know. You haven't even seen him trot.
Right? Yeah, we don't know at this point.
So he could have bad feet. He could be heavy. He could have allergies.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole load of things, but that's all something that you can tackle in the future. And I think if you start him off right and get him on eating and get his body back into health, he can, you can tackle the rest of your problems.
And I was looking at your list, and one of the don'ts you have in this very excellent article, which where can they find the article?
You can find it on my website, which I have a new URL, which is drwendyying.com. Or I'm going to link it to our driving radio show Facebook page.
Okay, and I'll also put a link in today's show notes to this particular article as well. But you say in here, don't let your neighbors feed him treats. One of the things we do have other people here at the farm, and we had to warn them about, is you can't play with him and then go play with your horse.
Yeah.
He's in quarantine. And a lot of people that haven't lived through having a lot of horses coming in and out don't quite get that concept. So, it's one of those things where we kind of had to educate them on, what that means, what quarantine actually means. It doesn't mean go rub on my pony's face and then go rub on your horse's face.
Right.
That's not what it means.
Yeah. And also, the thing is, that's really, I actually should have put that in because that's actually really important. Not just to quarantine that pony from your horses, but if this pony gets sick at all, like if someone brings strangles to your farm right now, this pony does not have the strength in his body to fight that.
Right.
So
the
not
other way
just
around is what you mean too.
For both ways.
Yeah.
And also, your neighbors are going to think that you're the worst person in the world when they see a pony like this in your yard.
We talked about that actually.
You have to either put a little blanket on them,
show they're loved.
or hide them in the backyard because, or
we
put a sign
find
out.
a fly sheet small enough.
Or put a big sign out in your neighborhood. Because, you and I live in neighborhoods where there's 5 acres. So people are riding by and they're going to be like, oh my God,
look at
did you see those Horse Radio Network people have this skinny pony, blah, blah, blah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But this is a great article, and we'll post a link to it as I said, in our show notes, and you can also find it at Dr. Wendy Ying, YING.com.
Well, there you have it. Horse Radio Network has thousands of engaging podcasts for horse people, and you can have them sent right to your phone. Just subscribe via your favorite podcast player. This is Coach Jen, and I will be back again soon with another tip. Until then, go ride your horse. The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements made by guests on the Horse Tip Daily. Please use your own judgment when listening to the tips on this show.